hated my mother all my childhood because she abandoned me. But I only learned the real truth when my father died. I found letters from the police that he had been hiding. I was 6 years old the night my mother vanished, and I swear I still hear the way her voice cracked when she begged my dad not to hate her. My name's Eli, I'm 26 now and I work at a crummy hardware store in Tucson, Arizona. And even after 2 decades, I remember every detail of that night like it's stapled to the inside of my skull. Mom was crying so hard her words blurred together. I was peeking through the cracked door of my bedroom, clutching the knitted white sweater she made me for Christmas. It smelled like her, lavender and vanilla and a little bit of cigarette smoke. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen," she screamed, her voice raw, broken. Then silence. I crept out, heart hammering. The front door was wide open. Her shoes were still by the door. Her purse was dumped on the kitchen counter. The wind rattled the screen door back and forth, but the world outside was black and empty. Mom was gone. And Dad just sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, a beer sweating in his hand. When I whispered, "Where's Mommy?" he didn't even look at me. He just muttered, "She's not coming back." I was 6 years old and my whole world ended that night. We didn't talk about her after that night. Not once. Not when I tripped over her old slippers still tucked under the couch. Not when my little sister, Jenna, cried herself hoarse on Christmas morning because there were no presents. Not when the house started to rot around us, mold on the bathroom walls, rats scratching in the attic, dishes stacked so high they grew their own ecosystems. Dad shut down. Anytime I said her name, even whispered it, he would snap. His hand would smack the table so hard the plates jumped. "She's gone, Eli. That's it. Don't make it worse." So I stopped asking. But the thing is, when you're a kid, silence isn't peace. It's a prison. At night, I would lie awake, clutching that white sweater so tight the yarn stretched out of shape. I'd press my face into it, breathing in that fading vanilla scent, pretending she was still there, sitting at the edge of my bed, running her fingers through my hair the way she used to when storms rolled in. Sometimes I'd dream she was knocking on the door, soaking wet, arms wide open. Other times I dreamed darker things, that she was trapped somewhere, screaming for help I couldn't give. I would wake up choking on my own sobs, sheets twisted around me like chains. Dad barely noticed. He started drinking heavier, spending nights passed out in front of the TV, sports games blaring until dawn. There were days when the fridge was empty except for old mustard and sour milk. There were days when Jenna and I didn't go to school because we had no clean clothes. There were days when we didn't speak at all, just drifted like ghosts around the collapsing house. When I was 8, Child Protective Services came. Dad didn't even fight it. He just stared at the social worker with dead fish eyes and signed whatever paper they shoved at him. That's how Jenna and I ended up bouncing through foster homes, dirty backpacks, bruised knees, eyes too old for our faces. At every new house, I kept exactly one thing close to me. The white sweater. The sleeves were too short by then, the fabric pilled and thinning, but I didn't care. It was mine. It was hers. It was the only proof that once I had a mother who loved me. I told myself stories to survive. Maybe she didn't leave us by choice. Maybe something terrible happened and she was trying to find her way back. Maybe. Because if she had just walked out, if she had abandoned me, abandoned us, then what did that make me? Something not worth staying for? The question rotted inside me day after day, year after year. It turned everything sour. By the time I was 15, I had convinced myself it was better not to care. Better to be hard. Better to be angry. Hope was a slow, ugly death. Hope was weakness. And still, on nights when the world was too sharp and my own skin felt too tight, I would find the sweater at the bottom of whatever duffel bag I was living out of, pull it over my head, and sit by whatever cracked window I could find, watching for headlights that never came, waiting for a ghost, waiting for a mother who had, in every way that mattered, disappeared. But then last month, after Dad died alone in some sad, roach-infested apartment 2 states away, everything changed. While Jenna and I were sorting through the trash heap of his life, I found something hidden, something he never meant for us to see. And when I read it, when I saw the truth for the first time, it felt like someone reached inside my chest and ripped my heart out with their bare hands. Mom didn't leave us. She was forced to. And Dad was the reason she never came back. It was buried in the bottom of an old ammo box, wedged behind cracked bowling trophies and water-damaged yearbooks, the kind of crap you don't even bother looking at unless you're desperate to find something worth keeping. The metal latch on the box snapped off when I forced it open. Inside, under the stink of mildew and rust, was a stack of yellowed papers tied with twine, bills, court notices, a hospital form, and then, tucked between them like an afterthought, a letter. Not from my mom. Not to her either. It was addressed to my dad. The envelope was brittle, edges curling. The handwriting was sharp, almost angry. From the office of DeWitt and Crane, attorneys at law. I didn't even breathe as I slid the letter out. It wasn't long. Half a page. But it hit like a freight train. Mr. Carter. It started. This letter serves as confirmation that, as per the court order dated May 5, 2005, your wife, Melissa Carter, has been granted a temporary protective order following documented evidence of domestic violence and threats to her safety. I had to sit down. The couch beneath me groaned under the sudden weight of the truth slamming into my chest. I read the words over and over, my vision swimming. Protective order. Documented violence. Threats to her safety. Dad always said she ran away. He said she chose to leave. But he never said anything about the cops. Or the lawyers. Or the fucking violence. I flipped through the rest of the papers with shaking hands. There were copies of police reports, ones he had hidden, ones he had never let us see. My father, the man who drank himself to sleep in front of Nickelback music videos, the man who yanked us out of school and moved us from town to town like fugitives. He hadn't been some sad, broken victim. He had been the villain. The kind that wears your last name like armor. The kind that kisses you on the forehead after dinner. The kind that teaches you to hate the person who tried to save themselves from him. I clutched the white sweater tighter in my lap, as if it could shield me from the wreckage of everything I thought I knew. I felt sick. Physically sick. The room tilted. The mold-stained walls warped and shuddered. The box of papers slipped from my fingers, scattering across the floor like dead leaves. I stumbled outside into the cold, gasping. The air smelled like wet asphalt and gasoline. The sun was setting behind the ugly strip mall across the street, bleeding orange and pink into the darkening sky. Didn't feel real. None of it felt real. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit something. I wanted to go back to believing she had just decided we weren't enough. Because at least that made sense. At least that hurt in a way I could understand. Now I didn't know who I was supposed to hate. Now the ground under me was splitting open. And I was falling. Into a black hole made of questions I was terrified to answer. Had she tried to come back for us? Had she been looking for us all these years, while we were lost in the system? Was she still out there somewhere, waiting for us the way I had been waiting for her? My hand shook so badly I could barely pull my phone out of my pocket. I called Jenna. When she picked up, all I could choke out was, "Jenna, Dad lied. He lied about everything." There was a long, shuddering silence on the other end. And then, very quietly like a child, Jenna said, "I always knew." That shattered something deep inside me. I had spent my whole life patching over the cracks with hope, anger, bitterness. Anything to keep the walls from collapsing. But now the walls were gone. And all that was left was the truth. Our mother hadn't abandoned us. She had been stolen from us. By the one person we were supposed to trust most. By our father. I didn't sleep that night. I sat cross-legged on the floor of that rotten apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my father's life. Crumpled beer cans, cigarette burns in the carpet, unpaid bills curled like dead spiders across the kitchen counter. The white sweater sat in my lap, a tiny, pitiful thing against my knees. I kept staring at it, running my fingers over the fraying stitches, trying to remember the sound of her laugh, the way she used to hum when she washed dishes, the smell of her hair when she hugged me goodnight. But the memories were slippery, like trying to hold water in my hands. Everything had rotted inside me without me even noticing. By sunrise I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this be the end of it. Dad had lied. He had stolen my life, my childhood, my mother. And buried the evidence like a coward. I wasn't going to sit here and let him win. I was going to find her. Even if she hated me. Even if she slammed the door in my face. Even if she had built a whole new life where I didn't fit anymore. I had to know. I had to ask the one question that had been clawing at my insides for 20 years. Why didn't you fight for me? The first step was finding her. It took everything I had, every contact, every favor, every sleepless night scrolling through ancient social media accounts and digging through public records. I didn't have money for a private investigator, so I became one myself. Jenna tried to help, but after a few days she backed off, said it was too much. I'm scared of what we'll find, she whispered over the phone, her voice small. I didn't blame her. Hell, I was scared too. What if she really had moved on? What if finding her ripped open wounds that could never heal? But the fear didn't matter. I had lived with a hole in my chest for too long. I couldn't go another year pretending it didn't exist. It took a month. 34 sleepless nights. Hundreds of dead-end searches. Until finally, I hit a small art supply store in Colorado, about 12 hours away by car. The owner, Melissa Ann Carter. Same name. Same middle initial. Same city listed on the old police reports. My hands shook so badly I could barely write down the address. For the first time in 20 years, I knew where she was. She was alive. She was real. She was within reach. The drive was a blur. I left at 2 in the morning, a backpack stuffed with the letter, the police reports, and the white sweater riding shotgun beside me. I barely remembered the highway, just endless blacktop, gas stations that smelled like burnt coffee and bleach, truckers blasting classic rock through cracked windows. The world outside was a blur of neon signs and dark fields and endless sky. Inside the car it was just me. Me, the sweater, and a growing, gnawing pit of terror in my gut. What if she didn't recognize me? What if she didn't want to? What if finding her only proved that I wasn't worth saving? I pulled over once, just past the New Mexico state line, and threw up in a ditch. Then I got back in the car and kept driving. Because fear didn't matter anymore. I had lived my whole life in fear. And it had cost me everything. By the time I pulled onto the cracked suburban street, my hands were slick with sweat. The houses were small and boxy with peeling paint and yards full of wind-tossed leaves. I found the right address. Her house was yellow. The paint was fading, but there were flower pots on the porch, and a wind chime tinkled in the warm afternoon breeze. I sat there in my car for a long time, heart slamming against my ribs so hard I thought it might shatter. I stared at the door. I stared at the porch light. I stared at the welcome mat that said, "Come as you are." I almost turned around. I almost drove away. But then I looked at the white sweater sitting on the passenger seat, tiny, stretched out, still carrying the ghost of her. And I knew I couldn't run. Not anymore. I got out of the car. My legs were shaking so badly I nearly fell on the curb. I stumbled up the walkway, clutching the sweater against my chest like armor. The closer I got, the smaller and more vulnerable I felt, like a little kid again, lost in a world too big and too cruel to survive alone. I stood at the door, raised my fist, and knocked. 1, 2, 3 times. The world held its breath. Footsteps on the other side. Soft. Hesitant. The door creaked open a sliver. And there she was. Older. Thinner. Lines around her eyes, silver threads woven into her dark hair. But her eyes. God, her eyes were the same. Blue and bright and full of so much shock and sorrow that it nearly knocked me off my feet. Her mouth opened. A soft, broken gasp. She clutched the edge of the door like it was the only thing holding her up. And for a moment we just stared at each other. 2 broken people. 2 lifetimes of silence between us. I opened my mouth, the words choking in my throat, and barely managed to whisper, "Mom?" Her face crumpled. Tears welled up, slipped down her cheeks. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trembling. And then in a voice so wrecked it barely sounded human, she said, "Eli, oh my God. Eli." She didn't grab me. She didn't throw her arms around me the way I used to imagine 1,000 nights in 1,000 broken foster homes. She just stood there, frozen in the doorway, staring at me like she was afraid I might disappear if she blinked. After a long, cracking silence, she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I stepped inside, my sneakers squeaking against the scuffed hardwood floors. The air smelled like lemon polish and vanilla candles, that same smell from some long-forgotten memory before everything fell apart. The living room was small, warm in a way that made my chest ache. Crocheted blankets thrown over a threadbare couch. A cup of tea half forgotten on the coffee table. Sunlight slanting through dusty blinds onto a wall lined with framed paintings. It didn't look like the life of someone who had abandoned her children. It didn't look like the life of a monster. It looked normal. It looked like something we could have had, something we were supposed to have if it hadn't been stolen from us. I stood there stupidly, hugging the battered white sweater to my chest like a shield. My mouth was dry. My heartbeat was thundering so loudly it drowned out everything else. She wiped her face roughly with her hands, smearing mascara she hadn't even realized was running. She started, her voice splintering. I don't know where to start. How about the truth? I said, sharper than I intended. The words stabbed the air between us. She flinched like I'd slapped her. For a second, guilt twisted hard in my stomach. I didn't want to hurt her. God, I didn't. But how could I not be angry? How could I stand here after everything and pretend this was easy? She motioned shakily toward the couch. I sat down stiffly, perched on the very edge, the sweater tangled in my fists. She sat opposite me, her hands twisting over themselves in her lap. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. I didn't leave you, she said finally, her voice breaking. I swear to you, sweetheart, I never would have left you. Tears stung the back of my eyes, but I forced myself to blink them away. You didn't fight for us either, I said in a voice so small I barely recognized it as mine. Her face crumpled again, and she dropped her gaze to her lap. I tried, baby, she said. I tried so hard. I thought the court would protect us. I thought I'd be able to get you back. Her words hung there, sharp and heavy. And inside me, two voices were screaming. One voice wanted to scream back. You should have fought harder. You should have never stopped. And the other, the voice I hated more, was terrified that she had fought, and it hadn't been enough. That maybe the world had never given her a chance to win. That maybe she had loved us and still lost us. She reached out across the coffee table, hesitating before brushing her fingers against the sleeve of the white sweater I held so tight. You kept it, she whispered. Like she couldn't believe it. Like it hurt just to say it. I couldn't speak. My throat was raw burning. I just nodded. She gave a small, broken laugh, the kind that sounds closer to a sob. I thought about you every single day, she said. You and your brother. Every day. Then why didn't you find us? I rasped. It took everything I had to keep sitting there. To not run. To not collapse. She looked up at me with eyes so full of grief and guilt that it almost broke me. I tried, she whispered. I hired investigators. I sold my car to pay them. I followed every lead I could find. But he kept moving you. Kept changing your names, hiding you. He made sure I couldn't find you. The truth slammed into me so hard I almost doubled over. All those nights spent wondering what I'd done wrong. All those years thinking I wasn't enough. It had never been about me. It had been him. It had always been him. I sat there, frozen between the little girl who had cried herself to sleep for years and the woman who had crawled through hell to find the truth. I didn't know if this was something we could fix. I didn't know if there was enough left between us to build anything new. But for the first time in my life, I knew one thing. She never stopped loving us. Even if the world ripped us apart. Even if the scars would never fully heal. Her love had survived. And somehow so had I. I don't even remember standing up. One second I was on the couch, stiff and frozen. The next I was pacing the room, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. The rage wasn't a spark anymore, it was a wildfire, roaring through every vein in my body. 20 years. 20 years of thinking I wasn't good enough. Of blaming myself for her absence. Of being shoved from one miserable home to another, dragging my brother through the wreckage with me. And all along it wasn't because she didn't want us. It was because he made sure she couldn't find us. My father. The man who tucked us in at night. The man who told us lies with a smile on his face. I wanted to tear a hole through the universe. I wanted to scream so loud it cracked the sky open. Mom watched me with tears spilling down her face, silent, like she knew this was something I had to burn through. I used to hate you, I said, my voice shaking. I hated you for leaving me. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but she didn't argue. And now I whispered, swallowing the knot of grief and fury clogging my throat. Now I hate him. The words tasted bitter, but somehow, saying them out loud made them real. Made them mine. I wasn't a scared little girl anymore, crying into a too-small sweater. I wasn't going to carry his shame on my back another second. I was angry. And for once, that anger wasn't going to destroy me. It was going to free me. Mom crossed the room slowly like she was approaching a wounded animal. Her hand hovered in the air for a moment before she placed it lightly on my shoulder. I didn't pull away. Her touch was tentative, feather-light. But it was real. I can't change what happened, she said, her voice cracking. And I can't erase the years you lost. I wish to God I could. But I'm here now if you'll let me be. I closed my eyes. Let the fury crash through me. Let it burn away the rot, the lies, the endless hollow ache. Beneath it, something new stirred. Something fragile and fierce all at once. Hope. Real, painful, stubborn hope. Not the kind you cling to when you're 6 years old, waiting at the window for headlights that never come. The kind you build yourself, piece by broken piece. I opened my eyes and looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman wasn't the ghost from my nightmares. She was flesh and blood. She was older, sadder, battered by a world that hadn't been kind. But she was still standing. And somehow so was I. I pressed the old sweater against my chest, the last thing she had made for me before the world tore us apart. And I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. It was a beginning. We sat down again, this time closer. The silence between us wasn't heavy now. It wasn't full of blame or fear. It was full of possibilities. Of a life we might still have if we were brave enough to fight for it. I missed you, I said, so softly I barely heard it myself. Her hand found mine, shaking, warm. I never stopped missing you, she whispered. For the first time in 20 years, I believed her. We didn't fix everything that night. There were too many years between us. Too many wounds you couldn't see, but still felt like broken bones under the skin. But as the hours slipped by, sitting in that small, warm living room, something heavy inside me started to shift. Mom made tea, even though my hands shook too much to hold the cup properly. We sat on the couch, side by side, the silence no longer choking but careful, almost tender. She told me about the night she left. How she had packed a bag in secret for weeks, terrified he'd catch her. How she thought the restraining order would be enough. How she waited at the police station for 3 days after he took us and ran, begging anyone who would listen to help her. Her voice cracked again and again. But she didn't hide it. She didn't hide anything anymore. Neither did I. I told her about the foster homes. About the nights Jenna and I curled up on thin mattresses, clutching each other against the dark. About birthdays spent wondering if anyone remembered we existed. About how I had learned to stop asking questions, to stop dreaming, to just survive. Every word was a cut. Every story was another scar we laid bare between us. And somehow, with every ugly truth we spoke, the bridge between us grew stronger instead of weaker. As the night deepened, I looked around at her little house. The paintings. The blankets. The flickering candles. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was real. It was hers. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. I could have something real too. Not the life that had been stolen from me. Not the perfect picture I used to beg the stars for when I was a kid. But a new life. One I built myself. With truth. With love. With all my ugly, broken, beautiful pieces. When it was finally time to leave, I stood at the door, the white sweater still clutched tight in my arms. Mom hovered awkwardly, tears shining in her eyes. "Can I see you again?" she asked, her voice small, afraid. I looked at her, really looked. Not as the mother who left. Not as the stranger. But as a woman who had fought battles no one else had seen. And still opened the door when I knocked. I smiled, a real, shaky, new smile. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." She reached out, and this time, I let her hug me. Her arms wrapped around me, and I pressed my face into her shoulder, breathing in the faint smell of lemon and vanilla. For a moment, I was 6 years old again. But I wasn't lost anymore. I was found. And I wasn't just hers. I was mine. I walked back to my car under a sky full of stars, the white sweater warm against my chest. I knew there would still be hard days. Questions that never got answered. Wounds that would take a long, long time to heal. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't just a survivor of someone else's story. I was the author of my own. And for the first time in 20 years, I whispered a promise into the cool night air. I will not be defined by what was done to me. I will be defined by what I choose to become. And with that, I drove into the night. Ready finally to begin.